It's all God. All right, this morning we're going to kind of pick up where we left off and finish off the discussion of deciding to live deliberately. Deciding to live deliberately. And today we want to just briefly reinforce again a little bit of why it's important that we do this, and then kind of go into some techniques. So the techniques are going to be kind of techniques for general living, but as applied to our spiritual growth. You know, it was kind of interesting to me many years ago when I took my first manager's position that they actually sent us to a course on how to make decisions. You would think that that was something that would just come naturally to people, but they found that that being a manager, one of the key responsibilities was making decisions, and yet people had no formal training in it, didn't have process or procedure to follow, just kind of made it up as they went along. So they took us all and shipped us off somewhere and sent us to a course on how to make decisions. So we're talking about living deliberately, living with purpose, living with intention, as opposed to just living, just breathing, just eating, just sleeping. But to live with some sense of purpose and intention for not only our lives, but our intention for each day of our lives. Kind of the big questions that we ask when we start to grow spiritually are who am I and why am I here and where am I going? And why am I here? Kind of the answer to that will bring us to intention. You know, our intention, our purpose is to fulfill why we are here. And yeah, most of us, you know, we don't know what that is at the beginning of our growth. It's something that we figure out along the way. And this figuring it out along the way is part of the process by which we develop uniqueness. We develop individualization. So the unity of life, that which we call God, the oneness, the singularity of life, is expressing itself as multiplicity, which is us, which is all creation, which is all that it has made. It has made of itself. It is expressing itself as and through its creation. The spark of life that is within us, we didn't put it there. Our parents didn't put it there. Biology didn't put it there. There's a spark of life that is using all of these things to express itself, to move forward in a direction that leads us back to where we started, which, as we said last week, is kind of the metaphor that we get from the Judeo-Christian Bible. Is we started in the garden, and we left the garden for the knowledge of good and the knowledge of evil. Not the reality of good and the reality of evil, but for the knowledge, the experience, the idea. And eventually we go through life and we ask the question, who am I? Why am I here? Where am I going? We become interested in our spiritual nature. We become interested in our spiritual growth. And what we are doing is working our way back to that garden, to that experience of the oneness. But we are doing it as a unique, individualized expression of the divine. So if we look back through the literature of the ages, you know, particularly what different cultures hold to be their sacred literature, their scriptures, certain themes start to emerge. From the last couple weeks we were talking about the themes that emerge in the mythologies of the world, that it seems like there's a certain primal idea that is trying to express itself, and it's coming through each culture in its own way, in the costumes and the characters that are appropriate for that culture. This expression that is pushing through us, this desire to know, that is pushing through us is that which is leading us back home in our uniqueness, in our culture, in our costumes, in our unique way. I think that's kind of one of the key concepts, that if we can hold on to that, even as we go through very stressful times, if we can hold on to the idea that the divine has created us out of itself to express its life through us and as us, if we can hold on to that, things become different for us. I'm trying to remember a quote from Rumi, and it's something like, "You are not simply a drop in the ocean, but you are the entire ocean in a drop." I don't know if that's exact, but it's close. So what the different cultures, what we experience over time, is everybody's trying to figure out, who am I? How did I get here? What is this thing called life? Is there a purpose to it? And it seems like our purpose then is to discover that purpose. Viktor Frankl's logotherapy, man's search for meaning, he found that people are looking for meaning, and when they can find a meaning, even when they can just assign a meaning to something, it takes on a whole different experience for them. So it's as if we are programmed, as if we are programmed to seek this purpose and to seek this meaning and to constantly be asking these questions. Who am I? Why am I here? Where am I going? We're like the turtle that finds itself up on a fence post and comes into consciousness, comes into awareness, and looks around and says, I don't know how I got here, but I must have had help. I must have had help. So this quest for understanding, for developing our own understanding, this is something that occurs in all people of all time. And we are the people who are here now, and this is our time. This is our time to discover it. So one of the things that we become aware of as we grow, what we become aware of is the fact that we can become aware. That we can become aware of what we call thoughts. That we can become aware of what we call our consciousness, the sum total of what we think and what we're feeling. We can observe our own emotions. We can observe these things that we call our thoughts, even though we have no good reason to claim that they're exclusively ours. How would we know that, you see? We become aware of them. They pass through our field of consciousness, or as William James says, stream of consciousness. But we become aware that there is this phenomena of thinking. And not only can we observe it as it's going by, but we can alter it. See, we can change it. We have feelings, and we come to realize that we can change those feelings. We don't have to engage in a feeling as it comes up. If anger comes up, we don't have to be angry. We can just observe the anger and let it pass, you see. If an idea pops into our head, we don't have to act upon it. And I said head, we don't even know where it pops into. In some cultures, the root of consciousness is the navel, is the stomach. So here we would point to our head and say, I have an idea. Other places they would point to their stomach, you see. So we become aware of this thing called thinking. Dr. Holmes tells us one of the greatest discoveries of the human race is when we discovered thought. As far as we know, our Our cousins in the animal kingdom are not aware of their thought. They may be, but we don't have a way of knowing yet, you know. They act on instinct, right? They can certainly, there's a certain amount of reasoning that's going on. You know, I love the little YouTube video, excuse me, my nose is running here. Apologize. Little YouTube videos of a crow with a paper clip that the crow figures out how to bend the paper clip to hook something that it can't otherwise get to. You know, certainly there's intelligence there. There's the ability to reason somewhat and to act appropriately. As human beings, we come to the realization then that perhaps we are the only species, at least we're the only species that we know of at this time, who can become aware of our thoughts, who can observe our thoughts, and who can deliberately change our thoughts. Think of Scarlett O'Hara. She won't worry about that today. She'll worry about that tomorrow. We can choose. We can choose. Now, the other thing that happens as different cultures over the eons, as they have spent time and they have learned how to observe thoughts, how to tame our thoughts through meditation, how to detach from the monkey mind, as we would put it in the Eastern terms, as we would move away from that. What seems to have happened is that over time people have realized that there is power in thought, there is power in belief, or perhaps to put it another way, that there is a power that acts upon our thought, there's a power that acts upon our belief. If you look at the New Testament, the message of Jesus seems to be, it is done unto you according to your belief. If you look in the Old Testament times, there's quotes, as you think and believe in your heart, so are you. If we look at Buddhism, we're told that everything that we experience as a result of what we have thought. And then the Stoic philosophers who influenced the self-help psychology authors here of the early 20th century said, what the mind can conceive and believe, the mind can achieve. And as I said last week, Florence Scovel Shinn said, life's a game of boomerangs. What you toss out, you're going to get back. So as we become aware of thoughts, we also become aware of the fact that something is interacting with those thoughts. It is done unto us according to our belief. And then once we make that realization, it starts to become very important to us to live deliberately, to choose deliberately. Right? So if there's something acting according to our belief, and our belief is not just what we are consciously aware of that we believe, but subliminal belief that we hold but we are not consciously aware that we hold. Remember in psychology classes you saw the iceberg, and they said what we are consciously aware of is the tip of the iceberg, but what our subconscious is aware of that our conscious is not aware of is 90% of the iceberg. Most of what we think and believe we are not consciously aware of. That we can become aware of, but we are usually not consciously aware of. So we come to consider then that there's this power in the universe that responds to us exactly according to our belief. Dr. Holmes called it the law of mind. And it is always acting on what we believe, that which we consciously believe as well as that which we subliminally believe. And now it becomes important to us to choose wisely, to choose deliberately. So this is why it's important. If we don't choose, if we don't deliberately choose what we are going to get, what the law is going to act upon, what is going to be done according to our belief, is what we believe below our level of awareness. And if we choose not to believe, we are choosing to accept whatever comes out of that level of awareness or that level below that which we are aware of. We cannot abdicate our responsibility to choose for ourselves. The divine cannot do for us what it has created us to do for ourselves. It created us to become aware and to choose, because that is how we develop our uniqueness. Divine love can't force itself upon us. So sometimes you hear people say, oh, well, God knows better than I do what to do here, so I'm just going to leave it in God's hands. Well, you're going to get back what your subconscious believes ought to happen here. It's going to look familiar because it came through you, but there's no divine power making up its mind for you. So we cannot abdicate our responsibility to choose. And our life is the sum total of choices we have been making or we have been abdicating. If we come that far down the logic, right, then it makes sense to choose deliberately. So we want to talk a little bit then about making decisions, choosing deliberately. And of course the benefits are that we get to set the course, right? We get to set the course of our lives. What direction are our lives going in? Can you imagine if you were out on your boat and you just let go of the helm and let the boat go any which way it wanted to go, Now, that might be fine for a couple of hours. It might be fun. Just go with the wind, go with the tide. But as the wind and the tide change, your course and direction are going to change, and over time, you will not have made progress in any one particular direction, right? Things will just be tossed around. So if we start with the assumption then that what our purpose is to work our way back to the garden, to work our way back into the, as Dr. Holmes put it, the conscious realization of the activity and the presence of God in us, as us, and through us. The mystical experience, if you want to put it that way. Practicing the presence, as Brother Lawrence put it, around the year 1300. If we come to accept then that this is our general purpose, now exactly how we do that, exactly the course we take, is something that we're going to decide based on our own uniqueness. Then we can kind of accept that, well, yeah, my life should have some sort of direction. Instead of just being like Osho says, our mind is like a stray dog that wanders and we follow it. We follow it. We want to have some direction. The direction that I'm talking about is not an occupation. It is not, an activity that we do, but it is more qualities of kindness, of loving, right? Of joy, the qualities of God. What are the unique mix of qualities of God that are expressing as you as an individualized expression of the divine, sort of work your way back home? So the first thing that we have to know about making decisions, and specifically the decision to live deliberately, is we have to start with an intention. What is it you want to know? What is it you want to decide? Before you can make a decision, you have to have some inclination as to what you want to decide. When we were watching some YouTube videos by Professor Henry Stapp, S-T-A-P-P, on the consciousness and mind connection. It was kind of like it was actually a conference at the UN, and part of it was how consciousness uses the brain, which was completely opposite of the way most folks think of it. Right? They think that the brain creates consciousness, but the idea was that consciousness is using the brain. And Stapp is a quantum physicist, and he was saying in quantum physics, it appears that you have this wave, this quantum wave of possibilities he talks about, where it could be many different things. And what makes that wave collapse into something specific is the desire of consciousness to know something. So, and I realize that I'm probably not quoting it exactly, so please look for Henry Stapp at the UN conference and watch it. It's about an hour-long video. You'll probably get more out of it, better understanding than I have out of it. But it was a fascinating idea, that consciousness wants to know something, and the quantum world collapses into some specific state that provides the answer. Right? Now, if that's true, if indeed that's true, it's a beautiful example of we have to know what it is that we want to decide. We have to put that question into mind. We have to start with the question, And here's how to begin. And we say, well, I don't know. I don't know what question to put. I don't know how to even ask the question. Right? So doesn't that make the question, well, I want to know how to ask the question? What I want to decide, what I want to know, what I want to choose is I want to choose how to ask the question. See? So wherever you start, if you say, well, I don't know how to do that, then do you want to know how to do that? What comes first? I want to know what comes first, So we have to be deliberate about, we intend to make a decision to live deliberately. And in order to do that, we need to have some sense of purpose. So maybe the first place to start is, I want to know what my sense of purpose is. This is the decision that I want to make. But regardless of what decision we're making, we have to figure out what we want to decide, And then we have to figure out, I call it the search for knowledge. In problem-solving workshops, it was brainstorming, for example. But many times what happens to us as human beings is we think of a question and then we think we have to figure it all out on our own. We have to solve it by ourselves. And what I learned to do over the years when I was trying to help groups develop their creativity was ask the question, well, who else might have had to make this decision? Who else might have had to solve this problem? How did they do it? Somebody put a funny meme on Facebook the other day, and it said that when the United States entered the space program, we realized that ballpoint pens wouldn't work in zero gravity, so we spent $12 million in several years developing a pen that would write in space, since the Russians used a pencil. So, sometimes we make things a whole lot harder than they need to be because we think we have to solve it ourselves, and we become embroiled in this problem solving when somebody else already solved it. See? So if you're looking for a sense of purpose, then what books are there on the subject? See, what lectures are there that you can listen to? Who else might have had this question, which the answer is going to be virtually everybody. And then what process did they go through? You see, and as we do that, as we search for the knowledge, whatever the decision is that we want to make, as we start to brainstorm and search for knowledge and find all of these different solutions that other people came up with, and of course we're probably going to create something that's a combination, right? We're not just going to reach and grab, oh, well, I like that one. That's what somebody else did over there. We may find something that's perfect, but we may find a blend, or we may find a mix. But of that, then we have to choose one, And what is the guiding principle? What is the guiding principle that we use when making our decisions? And to me, it's very simple. How does this decision lead me into a greater experience of the divine? That's it. That's, that's kind of like the acid test for the decisions. I could do this, I could do that, which one of these choices allows me to move forward or move furthest towards my purpose, with my purpose being to live in the conscious realization of the experience and the presence of God, the activity and the presence of God. So we have some kind of a value system that goes into weighing the alternatives. What is most important here? If I've got three things and they all seem to be equally okay, then how am I going to decide between the three? And sometimes it just comes down to, I like this one the best. Right? It comes down to the emotional level, not the intellectual level. I just like this. This one just feels good. See? And here we have to take into account our intuition. Now, the animals are blessed with instinct. They do things without thought process, without knowing how they do it. They migrate thousands of miles. I think I mentioned a couple months ago, I was reading something about a theory that the red sparrow, I think it's the red sparrow, migrates from northern Africa to England and back every year. And that now they think that they might be able to navigate because somehow the eye of the red sparrow is able to detect the entanglement, the quantum entanglement of electrons, which varies as the magnetic field varies, the magnetic fields that they fly through. It's a theory. I don't know that proved it, but that's what they're leaning towards. And it's amazing to think that, amazing to think that this thing called entanglement, which is mind-boggling in itself, that somehow this tiny little bird is able to detect that and use it to make decisions in its life. And of course it has, I have to say, it probably has no idea how it does that. It's just natural to it. You see, it's just its instinct. But we, in order to develop as conscious beings, we have given up instinct, and it has been replaced with intuition. There is a knower within, there is an inner knower within, and we must learn how to listen to it. So sometimes it comes down to which decision feels the best, which one is the most comfortable, which one do I like the best, And then we have to choose that decision. We have to choose it. And once we choose it, we have to act upon it. We have to act. It's not just a purely intellectual exercise. Once we choose it, we have to do something with it. We have to begin. Now, there's a couple of obstacles that we run into along the way that sometimes get in the way of trying to make decisions. And the first is, well, if I choose this one thing, then I can't have this other thing and that other thing and the third thing over there. And that's probably true at this time. At this time, I heard a talk out at a Sillamore one year, and I can't remember who was giving the talk, and they said freedom of will, freedom of choice, and the fact that there's a law that responds to us according to our belief should mean we could have everything we want. And the teacher said, yes, you can, but not all at the same time. Sometimes you have to have things in order, or at least at their own time. So sometimes we get afraid and say, well, if I make this decision, I'm not going to be able to have this other thing. And this comes to prioritization, and you say, well, that's true for now. But which one, if I had to choose between the two, which one would I want first? Which one would I have now? So you see? And we have to choose one, because if we don't choose either one, we can't have either one. So what has happened is we have made a decision to have neither, as opposed to choosing one or the other at this time. The second problem that we sometimes run into is, well, what if I don't like? What if I don't like the outcome of that decision? And that happens. That happens sometimes. We think we want something, and we bring it about. We make up our mind. We're very deliberate. We bring it about. And then it arrives and we go, wait a second. That's not what I thought it was going to be. So what do? You make a new decision. You make a new decision. We were watching the news the other night, and they were interviewing a lady who was kind of a nursing administrator, I guess, is the best I can figure, in a hospital. And they were asking her about how this pandemic was affecting her work. And she said, well, she gets to work very early in the morning. She gets to work like 5:30 in the morning. She typically works at least a 12-hour shift. And she had big whiteboards in her office, and she says she starts out, she lists all of the things that need to be done, and then she looks at all of the resources that they have available to do those things. And then she looks at what order they should go in, what needs to come first, what needs to come second, what needs to come third. And she lays out this plan for the day. And she says, and then stuff happens. Stuff happens that completely upsets the plan. And she says, you just make new plans. You just make new plans. We just make new decisions. We just say, well, I got that. That's not really what I wanted. What's really important here? Excuse me. So an example that I'll give you here, this is when I was in first year class. There was one of our students in first year class who wanted to know if he could make a decision that he wanted a particular car. And the teacher said, yes, you can. Do you believe that you can have that? He said, yes, I do. So he was very specific. He wanted. It was a Volvo. It was a red Volvo. It was a certain model year range and a certain price. This is what he wanted. He wanted that car. And he set his intention to have it and wrote out a treatment for it. And he had a couple of prayer partners who helped him. And one day he found himself in the next town over from where he usually worked. He was sent on a job the next town over, and he got lost. This was, believe it or not, there were days before we had GPS on our phones. And he got lost. And he went down a side street, and there, parked out on somebody's lawn, was the exact car that he wanted for the price that he wanted. And he knocked on the door and he talked to the people and he arranged to come back and take the car on a test drive. And he drove it over to a body shop. Another student in the class was the manager of the collision center for one of the big car dealers there in Durham. So he drove the car over to where his friend worked, and they put it up on a lift, and his friend let it down. And he says, I don't know where you got this car, but you need to take it back as soon as possible. He says, and don't even think about buying it. He says, this car has been in 3 major wrecks and it hasn't been repaired properly, and you really don't want to put your wife and kids in this car. So he did. He drove the car back. He put it back. And he said, I don't understand. I don't understand what happened. I wanted that car. I wanted that car. It was the right color. It was the right year. It was the right price. But there was something wrong with it. What did I do wrong? And the teacher said, well, what was really important to you there? The red car or your family's safety? He said, oh. So he modified. He modified his intention. He changed his decision. Right? In other words, from being so specific that it was a specific car, specific color, specific year, specific price, what he realized he wanted was safe, reliable transportation. Affordable, safe, reliable. See, qualities. Now we're into qualities, not so much into detail. Didn't have to be red or green or blue. Didn't have to be a Volvo or any other make. Safe, reliable, affordable transportation. And once he changed his intention to that, then within another week or two, he got, I think he went with a minivan, but he got what he was looking for. See. So if we make a decision and it doesn't turn out the way that we thought it would, or we get the result and we look at the result and it's not what we want, make a new decision. Make a new decision. We must live deliberately. We must choose. No one is going to choose for us. No one can choose for us. And the power that responds to us according to our belief is always responding to what we believe in the sum total of consciousness, which is what we are aware of and below our level of awareness. And it includes our feelings. It includes our emotions. Right? So brief recap then. We were created to choose. That is something that only we can do for ourselves. We have become aware of this thing called thought. We have become aware of this thing called consciousness. We have become aware of the fact that what we are here to do is to grow and mature and develop our consciousness into a greater experience of the presence and the activity of God here and now. And I'm not talking about an intellectual idea. I'm not talking about, oh yes, well God is all presence, therefore God must be here. That is true, but that's not experiencing it. That's not feeling it. You know, it's as we use in the class. You know, I can try to give you words to help you understand what chocolate tastes like. But until you put that chocolate in your mouth, you're not going to know what I'm talking about. And I have no way of knowing if your experience of chocolate is the same as mine, you see. It is the actual experience, the conscious realization of the experience of the presence and the activity of God right here and right now. That is our purpose. And our decisions then that we go through life with are this day, what this day, how will I live this day? How will I love this day? How will I express this day? In joy, in peace, in calm, in kindness, this very day. Now, I'm not talking about a day planner kind of thing where you say at 9 o'clock I'm going to do this, at 10 o'clock I'm going to do that. There may be some things that you do in there. You may say, well, at 7:30 I'm going to sit down and meditate, you know. 10 o'clock I'm going to call somebody, 11 o'clock I'm going to do. You may have certain activities that spring out from that desire to express, but I'm talking more along the lines of what are the qualities of God that you wish to experience today. Today I wish to experience love. Today I wish to experience kindness. And how am I going to do that? I'm going to do that by letting it flow through me, letting it flow as me. You see? It's not about getting. It's about giving. Because everything is already here within us. Because we are part of that divine. So it's, as Emerson said, we are already inlets who may become outlets of the divine. What we are doing every day is becoming a bigger outlet, a greater outlet for God's love. Through me, a greater expression of love enters this world today. So we must choose, and we must choose deliberately, and we must remember that we have to choose deliberately. No one's going to choose for us. And the first step in making our decision is to decide what we're trying to decide. What is it I'm trying to decide right now? Once we understand what our intention is, what it is that we wish to know, what is that, to put it in Henry Stapp's terms, what do we want the quantum wave to collapse into so we can see it, you see? And again, I don't know if that's actually true or not, but that's kind of the way he described it, and it gives a great visual. What is it that you want to know right now? What is it you want to choose right now? What is it you want to decide right now? Can we recognize that in the grand scheme of the universe, that whatever information we need is known? Can we recognize that it comes to us in a manner that we are perfectly capable of understanding, and that manner might be both through our intellect and through our intuition? And then we have to act as if we have to take action. We have to move forward Because it's in moving forward that we start to get the feedback that helps us to take the next step and the next step and the next step. Excuse me. And as I always say, even God can't drive a parked car. We have to get in motion. We have to begin, you know. When I was a kid, there was a late night talk show on in New York. David Susskind had a late night talk show. I'm going way back then. This is about the same time that Steve Allen had the Tonight Show before Jack Paar. But it was a little talk show in a little studio in New York, and David Susskind used to have people come in and he'd interview them, you know, just typical talk show format. And one night he had a guest on there, and the guest was the amazing Kreskin. Some of you have probably seen him. Kreskin was a mentalist. He's still around, I think. And he would amaze and mystify during during the interview. You know, he would do all these mentalists tricks. And the way he got paid was at the very end of the show, as they were getting ready to roll the closing credits of the show, Kreskin came back out. And the deal was that they took his check and they hid it somewhere in the audience. And if he couldn't find his check within the last 5 minutes of the show, he didn't get paid for that night. That was his grand finale for his performance. Now I was only about 12 years old at the time, so this is going back some. So this would have been 1962 or so. And Kreskin came out, and within just a few minutes, he found the check. And I can't remember exactly where it was that night. It might have been, I think it was up inside the nozzle of a fire extinguisher that was hanging on the wall. Somebody had put it up in there. And it was many, many years later that I figured out how he did that. Because he always had his hand on the person. So what they would do is go into the audience and they would take a person and all Kreskin would do is put his hand somewhere on this person, on their wrist or on their neck. And what he was doing, he was muscle reading. What he was doing is he would lean this person in 4 directions. You may have seen something similar to a person driving a car blindfolded, and he's got a passenger sitting next to him holding their hand. Muscle reading. So Kreskin would lean the person in 4 directions, and whenever he leaned them away from where the check was, their tendon would quivel, and he knew which direction to go in. And he could start in the center of the room, and then move halfway, and then move halfway, whichever the next direction was, and within a few short moves, he would be within 2 or 3 feet of his check. Now, as far as performances go, it was amazing. He truly was the amazing Kreskin. But the point I'd like to leave you with is this. If there is something within that individual that gave Kreskin the feedback he needed to know when he was going in the right direction, how much more so is there something within you that is giving you the feedback that you need to know when you're going in the right direction? Make your commitment. Make your decision to live deliberately. Do the one thing that you can do that, as far as we know, no other creature on earth can do. Become aware of your thinking and choose what you are thinking. Put yourself on a straight course to the love, to the presence, to the conscious realization of the experience of the presence and the activity of God in you, as you, and through you. Decide to live deliberately. And so it is.